Thoughts, sir? People are just joining, so we'll wait for next 5 minutes. People are still joining. We'll wait for
Yes.
next 5 minutes.
Perfect. I'll be ready.
Thank you.
Check.
Thoughts, sir?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I'm audible.
Yeah. So we'll open up register also. So we'll start the event. A very good morning to one all present here. Today, on this occasion of third webinar on travel in cities ensuring sustainability, myself, Davdanandan, research scholar of Sardar Vallabhbhai National Institute of Technology, Surat, welcome you. Today's event is jointly organized by the regional chapter Gujarat Rajasthan of Institute of Urban Transport India, which is a professional body under the purview of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, and AIC Surti iLAB Foundation, which is an independent institute set up to catalyze innovation and startup ecosystem to promote growth, entrepreneurship, and employment opportunity in the city of Surat. The AIC Surti iLAB has been established under the Smart City Mission of Government of India. In order to begin today's event, I invite Professor Gaurang Joshi, Civil Engineering Department, SPNIT, to welcome the audience and brief all us about the today's event.
Good evening, the eminent speaker, Todd Litman, and good morning to all the Indian participants. It's my proud privilege and pleasure to welcome all of you at this fine morning of Saturday in India for this very important webinar on sustainable transportation systems for Indian cities. Uh, 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 we will listen, Mr. Litman, in detail about the issues and challenges the Indian cities are facing. I would like to give a brief about the series which we have initiated 2 months before. Because of pandemic, it was not possible to have on-site seminars before. The Institute of Urban Transport India regional chapter decided to host a series of webinars, which to cater to the needs of the current scenario and development paradigm of Indian cities. In that connection, first webinar we held in the month of October on which the first tagline remains constant: travel in cities, at that point of time, we comprehensively looked at the issues of transportation in cities. So it was, contemporary issues of transportation in cities. Second webinar was focused on mega public transport projects. So we had two expert speakers from city of Hyderabad and city of Ahmedabad who are actively involved in planning, design, and implementation of metro rail projects. And this is the third project which is in series, and it is very important project. Important webinar to look at the overall growth and development of transportation systems in Indian cities in context of sustainability. I will like to add one thing that we are working right now for Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs to develop a methodological framework to evaluate sustainability of transportation systems for Indian cities. And in that case, we are actively, involved with many stakeholders. Of course, we have referred a lot of literature published by our today's expert speaker, and it has given an insight into the issues which influence the sustainability of transportation system in cities, and also has helped us in developing a methodological framework. So with this few words, I would stop here, and I would once again thank our speaker, Mr. Todd Litman. I have a personal desire to listen to you and meet you because we have referred many of your papers in during our doctoral research programs as well as master's research programs. So it was thanks to Nandan he could attend the TRB 99th annual meeting last year, and we could have this year rather 2020, and we could establish a linkage with you. So thank you, sir, for your acceptance of our invitation, and we are looking forward for a stimulating session and hope we will take this further for our regular interaction to further the cause of sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. Rajesh Pandya, Secretary of IUTI Regional Chapter Gujarat, Rajasthan, to give an overview about the Institute of Urban Transport India.
So now I'm audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the local regional chapter of IUT, I welcome all of you. The Institute of Urban Transport was established in the year May 1997. It is a professional body under the purview of Ministry of Urban Development of Government of India. And the object of the institute is to promote, encourage, and coordinate the state-of-art urban transport planning, transport, including planning, development, operation, education, and management. The membership of the institute comprises of academicians, architects, economists, engineers, transport planners, town planners, and professionals from various disciplines. It has more than 65 institutional members and around 1,400 individual members and 70 associate members. It has association from foreign organizations like LTZ Singapore, GIZ, UITP, etc. And the Secretary of Ministry of Urban Development, Government of India is the ex officio president of this institute. Under the aegis of IUT, the Surat or SVNIT regional chapter of Gujarat and Rajasthan is operating in the western region of the country. We have another collaborator, that is AIC SURATi iLAB, that has been established under the Smart City project of the Smart City mission of the Government of India. So it encourages and promotes these academics and knowledge sharing principles also. So with this basic information about the IUT that I'd like to share with you, one more thing I'd like to share with all the participants and the panelists, and especially with our distinguished guest speaker, Mr. Todd Litman. Sir, I'd like to make you aware that when I was doing my research work I had made a very wide reference to your work specifically about uh, the cities, the development, and the concentration, and the city form. I had referred a number of research papers published by you in the city form, and they form a very rich part of my references in my research book also. So it is a very, indeed, an honor to meet with you face to face in this webinar. So I welcome you on behalf of all the institute. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to all my friends in India. So I appreciate this invitation to be able to speak at this webinar. I hope that everybody can hear me clearly.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
good. Okay, so I will start.
I like to introduce first. I like to
Yes.
introduce you. Okay, thank you, Rajesh sir. So today we have with us Mr. Todd Litman. Sir is the founder and executive director of VTPI, and his work is dedicated towards developing innovative solutions for the transportation problem. The work of Sir is focused mainly on transportation planning and policy analysis, and has worked for the transportation problems of more than 24 countries. So pursued his bachelor's as well as master's from Evergreen State College, Olympia, Washington, and has a teaching experience as an instructor and advisor for the Next Generation Transportation Program at Simon Fisher University. Sir has been affiliated to various professional organizations like Institute of Transport Engineers, Transportation Research Board, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, World Congress and Transport Research, and has numerous publications in the reputed journal. I request Mr. Todd Litman to please engage the knowledge of the audience by presenting his talk on sustainable transportation planning in India, innovation solution to transportation problems. Please, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me start my show. Here we go. Okay. So, greetings from Canada, where I live. I have visited India, and I've done consulting work in some Indian cities, and so I'm a little bit familiar with the problems and the solutions there in India. So let's talk about some of the key issues that need to be considered when we do transportation planning in India. So one of the key issues is that India is rapidly developing and urbanizing. It's up to the people in India to decide how your cities will develop. It's important that your planning be strategic, so you're thinking long term. There's a lot of research going on around the world that can identify the policies that can create a more efficient and fair transportation system and more efficient and fair cities. So let's look at what some of those are. Now, the challenges are great. So great problems require smart solutions, and there are new ways to think about these problems, what we call a new paradigm that can help identify better solutions to India's transportation problems. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, why is this important? Transportation affects our lives in many ways. It affects that most people spend a significant portion of time in travel, and most households spend a significant portion of their budgets, their money on transportation. And transportation problems can affect our lives, traffic congestion and accidents and pollution, and they affect the affordability of traveling and being able to get to jobs and go shopping or do other activities. And so they affect our economic opportunities. Our transportation policies affect our housing and business costs and economic productivity. They affect our health and safety, and they affect the way our cities develop. So streets are what we call the public realm. They're places where people spend time and interact. And so if we want a more livable city, a better place to live, it's important that we design our streets to be attractive and safe and pleasant. So one way to think of this is to ask, what resources are being allocated? How do transportation planning decisions affect the distribution of resources? And so that includes the distribution of money and road space and curb space and parking spaces. So when transportation planners make a decision, for example, how to design a roadway or how many parking spaces to provide at a building or how to design a parking lot, they're allocating space and money. And we have to ask, what are the priorities? What's more important? Speed, safety, affordability, inclusivity, opportunity, economics, environmental quality, and we also ask who benefits. For example, if we design a street for cars, or we design a street for buses, or we design a street that's safer for bicycling and walking, who's going to benefit from those decisions? Who is affected by the allocation of resources that we make when we make transportation planning decisions? So keep that in mind. We'll be talking about these issues through this webinar. Now, I want to introduce the idea of sustainability planning, sustainable planning. Sustainability planning emphasizes the integrated nature of human activities and therefore the need to coordinate planning among different sectors, jurisdictions, and groups. So it's about balancing our economic, our social, and our environmental goals. That's what sustainability planning tries to do. And you can think of it as trying to be more comprehensive. So in the past, our transportation planning focused on solving traffic congestion and making parking more convenient and reducing traffic accidents and maybe reducing pollution. But in the last few years, there have been additional issues, what we could call the emerging issues, things like affordability and social equity or fairness and livability, local economic development, safety and health and fitness, and environmental quality. And all of those are important new issues. If you want to be successful as a transportation planner, your job will be better if you can start accounting, if you can take into account in your work these emerging issues. And so you're helping to create a more sustainable transportation system. So let's think about this from one perspective. Would we have a sustainable transportation system if everyone drives electric cars? What do you think? Well, electric cars are good. They reduce air pollution and noise, but they don't do anything to reduce traffic congestion or traffic accidents or the cost of building roads and parking facilities or the cost that households have to spend to buy a car. They don't improve mobility for non-drivers, So they do little to improve social equity. They don't get people to exercise more. They don't make people healthier. They don't reduce sprawl. They don't protect green space, wildlife habitat. So electric cars are good, but you wouldn't say that they really solve all of our problems. They are not true sustainability. Now, there's a change occurring among transportation professionals. We call it a paradigm shift. It changes how we think about transportation problems and how we evaluate transportation solutions. So the old paradigm focused on increasing mobility. That is, increasing the speed and distance that people could travel. And so it emphasized making driving faster and easier. The new paradigm focuses on accessibility, not mobility. So accessibility refers to people's ability to get the services and activities they need. Now, mobility is part of accessibility, but other factors are equally important. For example, the distances that you have to travel, and whether you have good travel options, whether it's easy to get around by public transportation as well as driving. And accessibility can also involve some of the what we call mobility substitutes. So right now, we have access by using the internet, but we don't have mobility. We're accessing information without having to travel. So mobility substitutes using telecommunications and delivery services is another form of accessibility. It's an increasingly important form of accessibility. So the new paradigm, it introduces new ideas. It says that sometimes our goal is not to increase how much people can travel. It's not to increase mobility, but it's to find new ways to increase accessibility in ways that require less mobility. So it changes our goals and our performance indicators. It means that we're no longer as concerned about speed, and we're equally concerned about things like the distances between activities, whether we're sprawling, our land use pattern is sprawled or more compact, and whether we have good walking and bicycling and public transit, whether you have good internet access, so you can access information without needing to travel. Those are all part of the new paradigm. So, as I mentioned, part of the new paradigm is shifting from focusing on mobility to accessibility. And so the new paradigm is much more interested, not just in cars, but also in the quality of getting around by walking and bicycling and public transit. And the new paradigm is very concerned about helping people locate closer together. So, for example, making sure that businesses are located where it's easy to reach them by public transportation, by walking and bicycling and public transit. And the new paradigm, which focuses on accessibility, it's recognizing that many people cannot drive. And so it places much more emphasis on allowing people to get around even if they don't have a car. So here's one way to think of it. Cities are places where many activities occur close together. That is, cities they increase accessibility by reducing the distances that people have to travel. So there's an increase in accessibility when people move to a city, but space, especially road space, is always limited in a city because there are so many things occurring close together. So in a city, to be efficient, a transportation system must favor the space-efficient modes, the forms of transportation that don't require as much road space, things like walking and bicycling and public transit. And the efficient urban transportation system favors those modes over people driving or using motorcycles. And this is important because the world is urbanizing. Probably many of you in this audience have parents or grandparents that lived in small villages or farms, but now you live in cities. In fact, that's occurring all over the world. During the next 35 years, billions of people are going to move from rural areas to cities, and especially in India. So there's going to be a huge increase in the size and number of cities, especially in India. And so your job as transportation planners is going to have to focus, a lot of it, your work will focus on how to improve urban transportation. Here's one way to think of it. Automobiles are wonderful servants, but terrible masters. It is very important to design our communities for people and then accommodate motor vehicles, rather than designing communities for cars and then try and accommodate people. So the focus in cities has to be on the movement of people, even if that sometimes requires restraining cars. So that's what we're going to be talking about a lot today. This graph shows what you could call the optimal automobile mode share, the portion of trips that should be made by cars in various locations. So in rural areas, in affluent areas where it's rural, you might have most trips are made by automobile. But as you go into lower income areas, so fewer people can afford a car, and when you get to denser areas, the portion of trips that should be by automobile goes way down. So in Indian cities, because they are large and dense and many people can't afford a car, your transportation planning should focus on moving people with the minimum amount of car travel. So you could say one way to describe this is we're going to value multimodalism. We're not saying there should be no cars, but we're saying that we should make sure that when people are making local errands, they're traveling to a local store, or children are going to school, it's important that they can get there by walking and bicycling. And when people are traveling on a busy urban corridor, so a lot of people are traveling to the same destination, they should have incentives to use public transportation. And only when automobiles are truly justified should people drive. So multimodalism says we focus, especially in cities, in developing countries, we focus on public transportation and walking and cycling when we design our streets and we design we allocate our funding for transportation. We call this the sustainable transportation hierarchy. So we're saying that especially in an urban area where there's a lot of activity occurring close together and there's not enough space for everybody to drive, we need to favor walking and bicycling and public transportation over people traveling by motorcycles and cars. So that's our sustainable transportation hierarchy. And you could think of this as a way to increase efficiency. So efficiency means we're getting more out of our system. We're getting more out of our roads, or we're getting more out of the funding that we invest. And so in the old days, we used to think, the old paradigm, we used to say efficiency meant increasing the number of vehicles and the speed that vehicles can travel. But now we realize that efficiency really is about moving people, not cars, and figuring out ways so that more people can travel around and access what they need with the existing amount of road space and the existing amount of expenditures, so funding, and the existing amount of energy and safety and other impacts. So we want to maximize the benefits. Now, one way to think about this is to think about your road space. How can we squeeze more people into our existing roads? And these images, these photographs, show the amount of space that's required, road space that's required for for the same number of people to travel by car or by bus or by walking and bicycling. And the key point here is, if we can favor the space-efficient modes, our streets, our roads are more efficient. And that is the goal in urban transportation. Now, we have to take into account not just the space that vehicles require for travel, but also what they require when they're being parked, when they're being stored. And this graph compares both the parking area and the travel area for different modes of transportation. And what you could say is, what this indicates is that if somebody drives, let's say, drives to work, they require an order of magnitude more space for that trip than would be required if they were traveling by bicycle or bus or public transportation, because it requires both more space, not just for travel, but also when they get to their destination, they need a parking space. So there's a huge efficiency gain if we can find ways to convince people to use public transportation or bicycle or walk rather than drive when possible. Safety is another, what you call a planning goal or a value. This graph here shows the number of deaths per 100,000 population for various cities around the world. And the bad news is that Indian cities have some of the highest traffic fatality rates in the world. So that's a huge problem. The good news is that there's research around the world that shows how cities can become safer. So that cities in India can become much safer with good planning. And part of that means designing cities where it's safe to get around by walking and bicycling and public transit, so there's less driving going on. This graph shows how those trends occur. So the y-axis, that is the height, shows the number of deaths per 100,000 population. And what we see is that when countries go from they go from automobile-oriented, so people are driving a lot, to more transit-oriented, or to compact cities like New York and Paris and London, traffic fatalities go way down. So the safest cities in the world are the places where people are affluent, but they don't drive everywhere. They rely a lot on walking and bicycling and public transit. There's another interesting bit of research. There's another area of research that also looks at what generates the most economic productivity. What transportation system tends to support business and employment and economic growth. And the interesting finding of this research is that when you're comparing otherwise similar cities, the cities that are more transit-oriented, where people don't drive as much and don't have to spend as much on cars and on fuel, tend to be the most economically successful. So improving walking and bicycling and public transit can actually be part of your economic development strategy, that it helps increase your employment and economic growth. there are a number of principles to keep in mind when we're doing this kind of planning. Good planning means that our analysis is comprehensive. We're taking into account all options and impacts. We're focusing on efficiency. We're inclusive. We're making sure that everybody has a chance to be involved. We're sharing information so that the people making decisions are well informed. We're integrated. So, for example, when we're making our transportation planning decisions, we're also integrating those with our land use decisions. So, for example, we're making sure that new businesses are located where it's easy to get there by public transportation or bicycling, and that housing is located where it has easy access to businesses, so that we're minimizing the amount of travel. And we want our planning process to be systematic and logical. So we do our planning and analysis in preparation for making our transportation and land use decisions. And the decision making should be transparent. So everybody involved should understand how the process works. Those are principles of good planning. So let's look at some of the specific types of planning that are important for sustainable transportation. One is pedestrian planning, making sure that anybody can walk safely in your city. Walking is very important because it's the most basic form of transportation. And it's also critical, for example, if you want people to use public transportation, you want them to take buses and trains, then improving walking to the bus stop and improving walking conditions to the train station is critical to making that easy. Similarly with bicycle planning, cities around the world are discovering the value of bicycling. Bicycling is probably the single most efficient form of urban transportation. It could go much faster than walking, but requires, it's generally cheaper than building a full public transit system. And it's much more flexible. You can go from one origin to a destination very efficiently by bicycle. So many cities around the world are making significant investments in improving bicycling conditions. And what we find is there's a lot of latent demand. That is, a lot of people would like to use walking and bicycling more, but they need adequate conditions. They need their city to invest more in sidewalks and bicycle facilities and bicycle parking for that to occur. But what we find is that when cities do make these improvements, the amount of walking and bicycling that occurs increases substantially. So this benefits everybody. If we can make sure that anybody who wants to walk or bicycle has good conditions, everybody benefits. Public transit is also an important area of improvement. So this graph shows the much larger number of people who can travel in an area using walking and bicycling and public transit, especially on very high volume corridors where you have thousands of people all traveling in the same direction. That's when it's very important to build bus lanes so buses are not stuck in traffic congestion, and rail lines so you can have those very high volumes on those corridors. It's much more efficient to transport people by public transportation than it is for allowing them to drive alone. So this is why it's very important as cities grow to provide transit priority. So buses and trains are not stuck in traffic congestion. They have their own lanes. So in most cities, once you have more than 20 buses per peak hour, a bus lane will carry more people than a general traffic lane. So once you have 20 buses per peak hour, that warrants converting a general traffic lane to a bus lane and developing bus priority systems on that corridor. So there's a whole system for planning bus priority. We call it bus rapid transit. Cities around the world are developing their bus rapid transit systems and improving those systems. So there are many factors, what we call the BRT standard, that identifies ways to make bus transit more efficient and attractive. So if you're involved in public transit planning, I encourage you to become familiar with the BRT standards and to work on improving bus rapid transit in your cities. Now, currently, India is not doing very well. Compared with other countries in the world, India has far fewer bus rapid transit systems and fewer bus rapid transit passengers than what we're seeing in other countries, particularly in China. So again, if you are involved in public transit planning, I encourage you to become familiar with the BRT planning process and to help create more of BRT systems in India, because that's a huge opportunity to create a more efficient and equitable, fair transportation system. Now, you can't think of buses alone. You have to think of them as a system, what we call transit-oriented development. So we're making sure that people live near the transit stations and near the buses, and it's easy to walk or bicycle from their homes or from where they work to the bus stop and station. So it's not just about the bus, it's about the neighborhood where the bus operates. And that's what we call transit-oriented development. And where you do have good transit-oriented development, even wealthy people, even people who can afford a car, will rely on walking and bicycling and public transit for many of their trips. So that benefits everyone. Another transportation planning concept, or another component of this, is what we call complete streets. So that means that your streets are designed for diverse users and uses, that we're making sure that the street accommodates walkers and bicyclists and public transit and cars, and also activities on the street. So cafes and businesses and vendors. So it's a good complete street balances all of those factors. You're not complete streets are not designed just for cars, but they accommodate many different uses and users. Another component of sustainable transportation planning is what we call transportation demand management. So this includes many types of incentives to encourage people to use the most efficient form of transportation. So a transportation demand management plan might include a combination of pedestrian and bicycle and public transit improvements, plus efficient road pricing and parking management and commute trip reduction programs and transit-oriented development, freight transport management programs. It can also include new technologies like navigation apps, so it's easy to find your way around your city without needing to drive. It can include marketing campaigns that encourage people to use the most efficient mode of transportation. All of these are part of your transportation demand management program. An important component of this is to ask who pays for roads and for your parking facilities, and to make sure that you're using pricing to encourage efficient transportation. So when somebody buys a car, they expect the government to provide roads for those cars. And they probably expect their businesses, for example, where they work or where they shop, to provide parking for those cars. And those are expensive facilities. For efficiency and fairness, motorists should be expected to pay for the facilities they use through what we call cost recovery, fuel taxes, road tolls, and parking fees. So when you decide to drive, you should be willing to pay for the cost of those facilities. And this increases efficiency because if we don't price roads efficiently, or we don't price parking facilities efficiently, they become congested. So roads and parking facilities are never really free. The question is, are you going to pay directly or are you going to pay indirectly? Are you going to pay when you use the road or use the parking facility, or are your other taxes going to pay for the roads? Or is the price of your parking, the cost of your parking, going to be incorporated into your housing rent or into the price of when you go to a restaurant? And it's much more efficient and fair if we expect motorists to pay directly, because that can be used to discourage congestion. So if roads are unpriced, in cities we will always have congestion. The most efficient, the most effective way to reduce traffic and parking congestion is to charge users what we call a decongestion fee. So you pay more under congested conditions, so it encourages people to shift to the less congested forms, the more efficient times or locations or modes of travel. With unpriced roads, traffic congestion increases to the point where it discourages additional trips. And if we expand those lanes, we don't reduce pretty soon the additional capacity becomes filled with what we call generated traffic. So you get an increase in the number of trips when you expand the road. That's called induced travel. And so it is not efficient. It is not successful to expand roads as a solution to traffic congestion. In order to reduce traffic congestion, we need to give people an incentive to shift from driving alone to using the more space-efficient modes, such as public transportation. And so high occupancy vehicle lanes, that is, if you have a special lane for buses and vans, and in some cases carpools, your road use becomes more efficient. So we call that managed lanes. Special lanes for buses or priced lanes using decongestion pricing. And this is only fair because with priority lanes, buses will operate faster and carry more passengers, which drives down their unit costs. So a good plan is that when you have a congested road, you put a toll, you charge for use during congested periods, and you use some of that revenue to improve your public transit service, so to make buses and trains more efficient, more comfortable and more frequent and better. And so that benefits everybody. Many cities are starting to apply these strategies. They're starting to apply road pricing, decongestion pricing, we call it. And what's interesting is when the proposals are first introduced, there's often a lot of opposition. So people don't like the idea of road tolls, of decongestion tolls, until they experience it. What we find is once it gets implemented, so for example, in London and Stockholm, and in Oslo and Singapore, once the efficient road pricing becomes established, public support tends to increase. So this graph on the lower right here, it shows that after the congestion tolls were implemented in Stockholm, public support increased. People liked it after they had to pay for using the roads, because they saw that, yes, they had to pay money, but the roads operated much more efficiently, so they had less traffic congestion delays. So they paid more in money, but less in time. Sustainable transportation planning requires that we change the way we measure transportation system performance. So right now, transportation engineers tend to evaluate performance based on the speed and affordability of and safety of driving. So we call it roadway level of service. But the new transportation planning, the new paradigm, is developing multimodal level of service. So yes, we're interested in the ease of driving, but we're also interested in the ease of bicycling and the ease of walking and the speed and efficiency of public transportation. So if you're a transportation engineer and you want to, if you want to become successful in the future, you want to become familiar with the new transportation performance indicators, the multimodal transportation performance indicators. Now, if you're familiar with the way new technologies or new ideas get adopted, you know, you're probably familiar with what we call the S curve. So a new concept is introduced and people experiment and they develop it and they start to understand it. Sustainable transportation is currently at the very low level. So a lot of people, they might only understand part of the concept. They might not fully understand it. And we're at the point now where it's time to start expanding the adoption. There's going to be very rapid adoption once people see the benefits of sustainable, multimodal, comprehensive transportation planning. So it's going to be up to you, those of you in this audience, that will take these innovations and expand them to the point where they're really achieving their potential. So here's some things to think about. Between now and 2050, so in the next 30 years, the number of people living in India cities will just about double. So there's going to be a huge increase in the number of people living in cities. And you can start thinking about the impacts. For example, should Indian cities expand and sprawl, or should they encourage compact development? If they expand, that new development is going to displace a lot of farmlands and forests and wildlife habitat. And you can ask, what will it cost to build roads and sewage systems and more parking facilities and more utility lines if it's expanding or if it's more compact? And you can ask, what type of transportation system is going to be more affordable to all those people? Should Indian cities aspire or plan for a low level of car travel and more walking and bicycling and public transit? Or should it plan for most people, most households to own cars? And what's going to be the financial cost to those households? And what will be the health and safety impacts if Indian cities develop with more automobile travel? What are going to be the health and safety benefits if Indian cities can be more safer for walking and bicycling and public transit? So those are the kind of planning analysis that people like you will need to do when you're deciding what type of transportation system you're going to plan for in Indian cities. Now, sustainable transportation planning is not a new idea at all. Professional organizations around the world are supporting these ideas. They're not just my ideas. They're not any single person's ideas. They are the new practices, best practices by most professional organizations. So if you want to become a sustainable transportation planner and become successful, you don't have to invent anything new. You just have to become familiar with these many reports and guidelines and analysis tools that are being developed around the world. So I know that's all. I covered a lot of information in a short time. If you want more information about these issues, you can visit our website, vtpi.org, and there's reports on our website about this, and also many very good publications. Some of them are produced in India, and in the handout, you should be receiving copies of the handout. There's some publications from Indian organizations on how to develop more sustainable transportation in Indian cities. So I hope that this inspires you to start, if you haven't done it already, to become familiar with the resources that are available for sustainable transportation planning in India. So that's my presentation. I hope that there are some good questions. I'm looking forward to more of a discussion. Let me go to see if we can look at the questions that are coming on the coming back to the chat box. So please send your questions to the chat box. Now I have to find my, how do I get to, there we go. Stop sharing, there we go. Okay, so are there good questions? Yes, I see.
Yes. Thank you for very interesting and informative presentation. It provides good directive to the Indian planners and policymakers. But if we look at the prevailing situation, the biggest question is how to begin. You rightly, mentioned where India is positioned right now, and if we look at that plot in the journey towards sustainable transportation, we are at the lower end of the S curve, and now the steep slope is beginning. And
That's right. That's right.
there-
So
now,
let me answer that in a way that you might that I hope will inspire you, and that is transportation planners and engineers are problem solvers, right? You
Yes.
wouldn't have gone into this profession if you didn't like challenges. So,
Yes.
our challenge is to convince people that the world can become a better place, that your city will become a better place if you apply what you could call best practices. So there are some new ideas out there for multimodal planning and smart growth, reducing sprawl, improving walking and bicycling in public transit, some of these pricing reforms and transportation demand management. Those ideas are proving successful. We know that they can work if you look at cities around the world that have applied them. So your challenge as problem solvers is not to invent the solution, it's to convince people in India to take the risk. And that's your innovation curve, is to get people from the very low level where they think they're thinking small, they're thinking very limited, and to show them that that their city can be better for everyone. That's my message. But of course, the details, there's many specific design challenges or specific problems when you are doing things like planning for to make your city better for walking and bicycling and public transit, or introducing new pricing technologies. Those are going to be good challenges for engineers and planners.
But I'm getting so much afraid about the journey which India is supposed to, begin, because we have four major challenges, in way towards achieving the sustainability. First is the rising economy. So per capita income, average per capita income in India is rising at the rate of around 4% per annum. And for effective economy, mobility is extremely important. So government is unable to enforce any specific and effective controls on vehicle ownership. So what? Second
Right.
is, the number of vehicles right now are around 150 if you combine two-wheelers and cars per thousand population. So it is much less
Right.
compared to the developed countries. Still, we are struggling to handle the issues related to congestions, delays, equity, environmental pollution, etc. So
Right.
the basic reason for this is very a myopic kind of urban development and urban planning with limit. Even the network is not properly developed and planned functionally. This is second problem. So therefore, any modifications or retrofitting we want to do, it is going to be biggest challenge, considering the local community level acceptance or non-acceptance of such endeavors. Third is the socio-political environment prevailing in cities and country at large. So making anything drastically different than what is people are habituated to, it is going to face a stiff public resistance, political resistance in the cities, and therefore the local governments are also unable to take up any strong measures. I will like to share one incidence of Surat municipal corporation itself. They had come out with a dynamic parking policy, so that the congested areas, they will the car owners and the two-wheeler owners will end up paying double or three times more parking charges, but community level acceptance was very minimal, and ultimately local government had to drop that policy. So even they had wanted to introduce a kind of a parking certificate scheme, that the person has to, the prospective buyer has to bring the parking certificate that he has adequate parking space available at his home as well as workplace, so that the public places are not encroached upon. But those kind of policy initiatives were met with a steep resistance, and ultimately it could not be implemented. And
Right.
third and the fourth one is, we are a neo-rich country, you can say so. If you look at the trajectory of road safety as well as the usage of more efficient modes of transport, the countries with higher per capita income, which you showed in your slide also, they are more into the usage of more efficient modes of transport compared to countries like India, because we are neo-rich country, and the vehicle ownership and individual freedom to travel is considered as a social status. That is another issue, and
Sure.
therefore it is a matter of community value, you can say so. And modifying and altering the community value is not that easy task, unless India achieves very high rate of growth in personal incomes, which is a kind of a distant dream, I would say. So in that context, the cities in India are facing mammoth task to turn to what we call it as a sustainable transportation system, with a prioritization for non-motorized modes of transport and public transport. And the another challenge which government as a whole is facing is investment for public transportation. We
Right.
know that public transport projects are never kind of financially feasible projects. And because of limited availability of resources and absence of mechanism to recover the cost of developing and maintaining the public transport systems, there are no takers practically for maintaining a very efficient and reliable public transportation system in cities. So this is the environment under which the cities in India are operating. So in that context, I would like your brief comments that what can be the way forward towards this journey for sustainable transportation.
Right. So that is the challenge, is that we have solutions. We know that they can work, but they will only succeed if decision makers are convinced that they'll be popular. So you're right that driving a car gives people social status, and that's true around the world. So it's up to planners, it's up to public policymakers to make sure that we're not subsidizing people's social status. It makes no sense for the government to make it easier for people to drive a car if that makes everybody else worse off. So let's say, well, in a typical city in India, about 20% of households own a car, and 80% of households don't own a car. Is that true in your city?
Yes.
Yeah.
But
So-
they own two-wheelers. Two-wheelers are omnipresent. They are so easy to purchase. Even
Sure.
as low as $10 you can have your two-wheeler at your home
Sure. Sure.
with easy repayment terms.
Well, the first thing you do is you pass a law that says that Indian cities should only allow electric two-wheelers because the gasoline two-wheelers are much noisier and polluting. So at least you can start controlling some of those impacts. But even two-wheelers take up a lot more space than somebody traveling on a bus or a train. So the idea that I think is very important to convey to your decision makers and to the general public is that a developed country is not where the poor drive cars, it's where the rich use public transportation. So if you visit the nicest cities in the world, the cities that people travel all over the world to be tourists, there's cities like London and Paris and Tokyo and Seoul, and those are the cities where they've tamed traffic, where they invest more in walking and bicycling and public transit than they do in cars. In fact, Paris just started on a process to greatly reduce the number of cars that are allowed in the city center because they realize that the city is more efficient and people are healthier and happier if the city planning, if the transportation planning favors walking and bicycling and public transit over cars. So the successful cities, the cities that people love, are the cities that are restricting car use. Now, that's not to say that there's zero car use, but it is to say that they recognize that public policies have to limit the amount of driving because let's think of it this way. If you had a party, and so you're having a party for your friends, and your house, you know, the space that you have can accommodate, let's say 20 people. What happens if you invite 30 people to a party where there's only space for 20? At some point you have to say, we have to limit the number of people we're going to invite. There's only so much space. Think of your streets. Your streets are a very valuable public resource. Your city owns the street? The decision that transportation engineers and planners have to make is, who is that street space for? How should the city allocate that space? What are the priorities? So that's what I meant with this slide here. Okay, so you have a street, and it's a public realm. It is the public. It is to be shared. It's for everybody. Should that street be designed so that cars can drive as fast as possible? Should it be designed to maximize car traffic? Or should it be designed to maximize parking for cars? So motorists, when they want to park, they're going to use some of that valuable space? Or should that valuable space be allocated first to pedestrians, and second to bicyclists, and third to public transit, and only to cars if there's some space left? So your challenge as the practitioners, as the people who guide the decision making, is to help show that if you design a complete street, so the streets balance the various uses. They have space for walking, and space for bicycling, and space for public transit, and space for cars. That's providing the maximum benefit to the maximum number of users. Or here's another way to think of it. You should tell the mayor of your city, and you should tell the people who are in charge of your transportation engineering, that they have to spend, let's say, 1 month out of the year without driving a car. They have to experience what the transportation system is like for somebody who's not a car user. Yes.
Sir, Dr. Rajesh Pandya is a Deputy Municipal Commissioner of Surat Municipal Corporation. So I think you have rightly made this comment. Many times we suggest that let the policymaker and planner, use, footpaths or bicycles and experience themselves that what kind of, inconvenience and feeling of, unsafe environment, those NMD users have. Very rightly, pointed out. Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's do a thought experiment.
I think Rajesh Pandya sir can respond. Dr. Rajesh Pandya.
Yes, sir.
He is from local government.
Okay.
May I add something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
We all agree what you have been pointing out. This is a felt thing that was felt by all the planners, even town planners and transportation planners. But as I will be not wrong to point out, we have a very little say in the policy matters. Especially, policy matters are mostly governed by political and economic factors. So
That's right.
these factors are on the backstage whenever final decision is made or a decision are made on a large scale. But after this pandemic situation, this crisis has also created an opportunity. This has given us some time and space to think. This is also giving us a time to realize that what we were doing is wrong, especially in the transportation sector, because this situation has created an image that private vehicles are not required, and the public transport, which we were trying to promote like metros, are also not very safe.
Right.
So what is the way out? Now the government is thinking very fast track line of promoting NMTs and pedestrian movement. The Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, MOHUA, of the central government has already launched one challenge or a project. They call it C for C, Citizens for Cycle Challenge. So they have asked about 100 cities how you can convert your streets to cycling-friendly streets. That's one challenge. Another parallel challenge they have launched is called Street for People.
Right.
You will be very correct and I'll not be wrong if I say the streets in India are most citizen pedestrian unfriendly streets.
Yeah.
We don't have spaces to walk. Footpaths are for parking and for encroachments. So people are dying, as you correctly stated, in traffic accident more than in any other reason. But now the policy makers have come out of their sleep. Now they are thinking, yes, enough is enough. So we have two challenges. See, it is coming from top down. The highest level of governance, that is central government. They are thinking, yes, this is something we will have to do. So the cycle for change challenge for cycling and street for people challenge, and they have merged both these challenges. Now they have realized that these things cannot work in isolation. Cycling cannot work without NMT, and NMT cannot work without cycling. They are a part of same fabric. So we are now they have merged, and it is a they have taken up a now they encouraging capacity building, directing, guiding, giving guidelines to the cities and the city planners. How we can convert our streets from vehicle-friendly streets to pedestrians and cycle-friendly streets. So this is very simple in saying. Implementation, it is a different, very difficult thing to be done. So, but they are doing all their best. They are giving the guidance. They are giving the technical know-how. They are doing whole handling and sharing. Other cities can share what the other cities are doing. So, the way ahead is showing some hope that now we will be shifting from the vehicle oriented development to pedestrian oriented development. Initially it was vehicle oriented development, then it became a mad rush for metros. Every city is metro. Small city like Jaipur, small city like Nagpur have a metro. Metro is not the final solution for everything. So now they are realizing that we have to integrate all these things with pedestrian friendly, cycling friendly, mixed development or transit oriented planning. So the way ahead, as you suggested, we have taken it up at the highest level. We are moving with the citizens. Let us hope with guidance like people like you, enlightened people who have done good work, research, they can guide us. Move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, that is the challenge that practitioners, that is planners, yeah, planners and engineers all around the world face that problem because we don't really make the decisions. The decisions are made by policymakers. But I think we can do a good job of communicating what I like to call the benefits or the value case for these results. So, for example, an engineer, a transportation engineer, can provide information to the city council that shows who benefits, and you could say that improving walking and bicycling in public transit, it benefits the largest number of people. It doesn't just benefit car travelers, it also benefits poorer people. And so you can make a social case for saying if we want to help poor people, we need to make sure that the forms of transportation that poor people use, that is walking and bicycling, is improved. And you could say the same for safety. You could point out that your city becomes safer and healthier if people drive less and rely more on walking and bicycling and public transit. You can also show that, well, let me ask you this, or let me put it this way. When somebody buys a car, they're committing to spending a lot of money on that car and a lot of money on gasoline to drive the car. So every time somebody buys a car, their future, the future economy will depend on India importing more gasoline more petroleum from other countries. India, a good portion of India's export exchange now goes to buying petroleum, importing petroleum. It is harmful to the Indian economy if people buy more cars, and so people in India have to import more petroleum. So you could make a business case that increasing walking and bicycling in public transit so people don't spend as much money on gasoline is part of your national economic development and energy security strategy. So these are all part of your value case for communicating to the decision makers, to the mayor, the city councilor, the provincial or state governments. They need to see that that a sustainable transportation planning helps achieve their goals. So it's up to you, the practitioners, to be able to show the many benefits that result from a more sustainable transportation planning. What do you think? Are policymakers in India, are they ready to hear that message? Are they ready to change?
If you are talking of policymakers as city planners or like transportation urban planners, yes, we are ready, we are enlightened, we are trying for that. But unfortunately, we are not the real policymakers. We are the assistants to the real policymakers. So we have to make them realize now that we have been enlightened, and we will be working with the real policymakers, that are the administrators or the political bosses. They are the real policy makers. We can say the implementators of policy. So we are working with them. We are making them enlightened. And I think from the recent trends that we are getting, yes, we are ready to work on that.
Right. So part of your job isn't just planning and engineering, it's also the economics and the communication. So you can say that your plan is going to make the city a better place, and you're showing that you're solving the problems that the decision makers face. And that's the good news, because sustainable transportation planning really is very beneficial. It's good for, it reduces, or it helps businesses, it helps the economy, it helps poor people, it increases safety, it increases health, many benefits. So it's up to you to be able to frame the analysis so that it's very clear. Now, it's challenging to communicate some of these issues, but fortunately there are many good resources now that are being developed. I just added to the chat box links to a couple of the organizations that are working in India to develop tools for sustainable transportation planning. So I would recommend that anybody who's interested in these issues should read up on the information that comes from the IDTP, the Institute for Transportation and Development Policy in India, and the World Resources Institute in India, and the Tata Institute, and all of these organizations. They have the tools. It's going to be up to you to take those tools and apply them in your city. So you're taking the general idea and then you're saying, in our city, here's how we calculate the benefits. What do you think? Does that work? Will that work? Do you think you can make some progress?
I'd like to add that ITDP, we are already working with ITDP. Shreya Gadpilli of ITDP. We are working the whole ITDP team, and they are the technical partners to the government of India in the Cycle for Change challenge. They have worked in Pune, they have worked in Chennai, and we are also taking them some guidance from them, ITDP. And WRI also, I think, and all their team, we are working with them also in other like Clean Air Mission and in this transport division also. So we are we have already have their context, and your reference has coordinated our efforts. So your reference has again intensified our efforts. So I think we will be moving ahead with this also.
Yeah.
Connection.
Very good.
I think I've lost my connection. Okay, there is some issue with my connection. I'll not be able to communicate.
Yes.
Are there any other questions that we should?
Yes, sir. There are a couple of questions from the students and participants. I'll just ask few of them because it's not possible to discuss all. The first question is from Janak Kumar. He is asking that in Indian cities, first and last mile connectivity with absence of NMT infrastructure is a major issue. So please share your views how government should approach this development of those facilities in developing countries.
So we're talking about you say the last mile from public transit?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Sure. So that's right. So every time somebody uses public transportation, they have to walk to and from the bus stop or the train station. So you have to plan this as a system. You have to think public transit. We could have the best public transit in the world. You could have a metro, but if the station area doesn't have good walking conditions, then people can't get there. So of course we need to plan. Any successful public transit system needs to include improvements in walking and bicycling and connection. So we call it connectivity. We need really good connectivity. So if your city is spending millions and millions of dollars to improve public transit, it should be willing to spend a small portion, let's say 10 or 15% of your public transportation budget on improving walking conditions around the stations and the bus stops, because that's part of the system. In other words, our planning needs to be door to door. You need to think of what it's like to leave your house and then walk to the bus stop or the train station, and then to take the bus or the train, and then when you're at and then at the end to walk to your destination. All of that is part of the journey. So we talk about planning for a full journey. So here's the way you want to think about it. You want to envision the ideal trip. What does it take so you actually look forward to walking to the bus stop? You think of the bus stop as a really nice place. Your bus or your train is a really nice experience, so you actually enjoy riding on your bus or train, and it's useful. You can get some work done when you're traveling there, and the walk to your destination. Those are all pleasant experiences. So what would it take for Indian cities to be delightful? So, when people visit cities like London or Paris, they always talk about how nice it is to walk around those cities, and there's so many delightful things to see. I'm sure Indian cities can do the same thing. It's going to be up to you, the people in this audience, to figure out how to create a transportation system so people look forward to their commute to work, or they look forward to going to the store, that the walk and the bike ride and the transit trip are actually part of the delight, part of the positive experience of your city. Is that possible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, good.
So second question is from Chetan Kumar from IIT Bombay. He is asking that can you give a specific classical example of a metropolitan city which was initially unsustainable, but it turned out to be sustainable urban land use transport ecosystem? Any classical example for that?
Well, the good news is cities all around the world are making progress. So almost every city is doing some of these. So let me give you an example that I happen to know about, and that is Seoul, South Korea. So Seoul, South Korea used to have a big highway going through the center. And then about 15 years ago, the mayor said, we want to make the city center a more beautiful place. And so, let's see. So they, in about 15 years ago, the mayor told the traffic engineer, the head of Seoul's traffic planning, we want to change our city so it becomes a more beautiful place and the downtown becomes a better place. And so they took down the freeway and they converted it into a bus rapid transit system. Let's see if I can get a link to this. Here's one of the examples. There we go. So Seoul, South Korea now has one of the more successful bus rapid transit systems because the city committed to changing from a highway-oriented city to a multimodal city. You can still drive, but you can't. But far more people use public transportation, and they were able to turn the city into part of the downtown into a park, a beautiful park. It's very popular. The same thing is happening in many other cities. In San Francisco, the city took down one of the big highways and turned that into a boulevard. And the city of Seattle, which is near where I live here, has been successful at cutting the number of car trips to the city in about half. So the cities around the world are starting to make these sustainable transportation shifts. I hope you can see. Let's see if I can get my sharing. Let's see. Here we go. I hope everybody can see. This is Seoul, Korea. Seoul and South Korea's capital. And this used to be a freeway. They tore down the freeway and they turned it into a river park. And this is just one example of what you can do, what a city can do if you take the space, the amount of land that was used for roads, for cars, and by shifting to bus rapid transit, you're reducing the number of cars that drive downtown, and you're freeing up land for public delight. So yes, it can be done.
Okay, sir. Thank you. And there is one more question, sir, from Mansa Swami. She asked that with the tropical climate and less road space in urban areas, landscaping and plantation is changing over time. So is there any warrant or guideline for the climate-centric sustainable planning?
Well, sure. In planning, we use the term resilience. going to hear the term resilience a lot. Resilience means you're preparing for an unpredictable future. A lot of cities, you don't know what the future is going to be. There could be changes in climate. There could be changes in population. There could be changes in economics. Maybe there's going to be more businesses or fewer businesses. And you can always have pandemics. You can always have a disaster. Okay, so resilience planning it says we can't really predict the future, so we're going to make sure that there's some flexibility, that we're going to design in flexibility. So for example, resilience planning says that we want to favor resource efficient modes, partly because that we don't want, we want to make sure that if there's a change in the economics or a change in climate, if we have to, let's say if part of our city is going to flood, and so suddenly we have to change the way the city's designed, that we are prepared for that. And it does turn out that a multimodal transportation system, so you're not relying on everybody driving everywhere, that tends to be more resilient. For example, if in Los Angeles, they have most people drive to work in Los Angeles, and occasionally they have an earthquake, so some of the bridges break or collapse, and so suddenly the city of Los Angeles needs to find a way for people to get to work when there isn't as much road space. So what do? They start operating buses on that corridor. Public transportation buses can carry an awful lot of people when part of your system fails, when you have a failure in a link. That's an example. And another example is if you ever really want to have fun, get involved in planning for a major a world event. So I had a very small role to play in planning for the Winter Olympics 10 years ago. The 2010 World Olympics took place in British Columbia. And sometimes planning is really sad, but when you're planning for an Olympics, it's like planning for a giant party, and you're going to have hundreds of thousands of people all coming to your community. Now, that's the kind of event that your city needs to prepare for. Sometimes it's a fun event. You're having a giant sports event or a cultural event, or sometimes it's a disaster. You're evacuating people from a fire or from an earthquake or whatever. But either way, the solution is having lots of buses and very clear, whether you're bringing people in for a party and a conference or an Olympics event, or you're rescuing people from a disaster. Either way, having very good public transportation and lots of buses that you can deploy very quickly. So you can say, oh, we need 20 buses there to pick people up because it's flooding, or we need 50 buses because we're having a sports event, or 100 buses. All of that should be normal part of your transportation planning. And if you have those systems in place, you have more resilience. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Hello, am I audible,
Yes.
sir? Yeah.
Yes. We
So,
have
sir,
that.
at last,
Yeah, now I can hear you.
yeah. Sir, at last, Professor Ashish Damania at Civil Engineering Department, SVNAT, would like to interact with you. Ashish, sir, please.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Litman. This is Dr. Ashish Damania, Associate Professor at the Civil Engineering Department. So it's nice to hear you. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear most of what you say.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So actually, actually, what I can see is that we have put up a heavy reliance of constructing the roadway infrastructure in our country. Even in Surat city, you can see that here we are having more than 100 ROBs and flyover bridges just to accommodate the huge traffic demand. Okay, so that means that the traffic demand is increasing day by day, but the transportation demand, that the public transport demand, is not that much. So people are buying two-wheelers like anything. That means they are having the trip demand. So the thing is that while you are going for a shorter trip of suppose 1 or 2 miles in a day, and then for either work trip or either to purchase something in the market. So rather than using the public transport which is existing, you are using your own vehicle, and then you are facing that some other issues like traffic congestion, environmental pollution, and all these things. So the question is that how to attract these shorter trip pupils towards the public transport. And second is, suppose we are moving to different reason to reason, like there is a market reason, then there is a recreational reason, and all these things. So while I'm going to the market, I need a public transport at my doorstep, because might have the number of baggages, having shopping and all these things. So that might be action. So the question is how to attract these shorter trips towards the public transport, and what type of public transport is best suitable under such conditions. Because you know that for whatever the heavy reliance we have put up for making the roadway infrastructure construction, because I had seen that many of the US city or European cities, they are having a very shorter urban streets. Okay, where we are having here 8 lane or 6 lane divided roads. Okay, just to accommodate whatever the traffic demand is there. Okay,
Right.
so in that case, if we are providing a better public transportation facility, then that could cost, I think, very meager value to what infrastructure we are providing for accommodating traffic. Yeah, over to you. Thank you.
Right. So public transportation, especially a subway or a rail line, is extremely expensive. And it's actually not very efficient for short trips. So in some cities, the public transit authorities are actually encouraging people to walk and bicycle rather than use the subway for short trips. They don't want people, because the subways are getting crowded. Now, as I mentioned, probably in a lot of situations, the most efficient travel mode is a bicycle. Now, in the past, we said a bicycle can go, let's say, 8 or 10 kilometers an hour, maybe a little bit more, say 10 or 12 kilometers an hour, and most people will ride 2 or 3 kilometers. But now, with electric assist bikes, you can double that. So some researchers recently did a study, and they estimated what portion of urban trips, of the trips that people make in a city, could be made by walking, a pedal bicycle, or an electric bicycle. And what they found is when you go from a pedal bicycle, so you have to pedal it yourself, to an electric assist bike, you went from about 10 or 15% of trips could be made by bicycle to about 30 or 35% of trips can be made by bicycle if you have electric assist. And in hot climates, like in India, that's particularly appropriate, because some people will say, oh, it's too hot to bicycle. But if they have and I'll sweat too much. But if you have electric assist, it makes it much easier. So I think part of your transportation plan should be to restrict gasoline-powered motorcycles and scooters and encourage electric scooters, and especially the very inexpensive, lightweight electric scooters. So they're very affordable, and you're encouraging them by making sure that virtually every major urban street has a bike lane. So everybody, I don't know how things are in India right now, but in North America, there are, some people will bicycle. We call them bicyclists. But there are a whole bunch of people who would love to bicycle, but they're a little bit afraid. It's a little difficult to get them started. And so we have a program, a lot of our planning is designed to get people who could bicycle. They're willing to give it a try, but they're frightened by bicycling in traffic. And so it's transportation planners' responsibility to make sure that the facilities are there. If you do an analysis and you ask what type of facility benefits the most people, in Indian cities, I suspect that spending money to make your city more bikeable is going to be more cost effective. There's going to be more benefits per dollar or per rupee spent than spending money on subways or metros or spending money on flyovers or highways. Those are extremely expensive facilities that only a minority of your population can use, where if you can successfully develop bicycles, then it's very cost effective. Parking, your parking facilities are much cheaper. They're very cheap to buy, much cheaper than a car or a motorcycle, and they're not polluting. So your challenge is to convince people who think bicycles are just for children, right? The old paradigm, bicycles are not important, and the new paradigm says no. Bicycles can serve maybe a third of all your trips. A third of all your trips could be by bicycle if you have the facilities. So how can you frame the business case? What will it take for you to convince your mayor that it's worth investing in bicycle facilities?
Right. Right. Actually, as the Pandya said, that if we are providing the separate bicycle track and all these things, that it will be encroached by some other people. So that is the real challenge. Yeah. Thank you to listen you, and we would like to listen you in future also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I invite Professor Srinivas Atkatkar to please give vote of thanks.
Hi, Todd. I will say hi, Todd.
Hi.
It's good evening for you, and it's good morning for all the eastern side participants. It was really a very commendable thought which my colleague and my my friend Professor Joshi had thought that we can go for a kind of interaction and a session from Mr. Todd Litman, who is, I think, a synonym of sustainable transportation. I would say that for that matter, if we get any doubt related to sustainable transportation, even knowingly, unknowingly, we ask our doctoral students that please go and refer to Litman's literature. Perhaps we will get something out of it. And believe me, 95% times out of 100 times we will get it. Am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So that is the kind of body of literature you have created in the very interesting area of sustainable transportation. Before I really propose vote of thanks, I had a very small opinion, or maybe I can say that some kind of comment, and I will like to also hear from you. What is your take on that? Sustainable transportation, we are saying that is right. Absolutely, it is perfect that this should be like this. That what is my point is, should we have really that kind of data sets to decide whether it is really sustainable or not? So if it is so, then how to do it? However, this is particularly I'm talking in context of Indian cities. How data is collected? Is it still a home-based interview survey? or it is still getting planned based on the some observed OD trip tables? And is there any way really to look at how this can be revisited using some advanced versions of data collection methods? And in that case, we can also take some help of technology. And then shall we say that to do more research, or to have more sustainable transportation, to do more data collection and do more sustainable transportation related proposals, or propose some data-driven policies for that matter, and then see the effectiveness of that. So, what is the time we are spending in demonstrating the effectiveness of that particular policy, which is going to take you towards sustainable transportation? As you rightly pointed out in your session, that we are on the upward trajectory, and then we are one of the we are going to one of the fastest. Already we have got the highest urbanization rate, particularly as a Surat. I think I'm quite confident on that. Because we have a very proactive authority, Surat Municipal Corporation, and we have almost like a very homely kind of collaboration with them. And as rightly Dr. Rajesh Pandya, who is our Deputy Commissioner of Surat Municipal Corporation, he is almost striving and driving the force of sustainable transportation in city. So if we want to suggest something for city of Surat, we always try to take his help, and then slowly we are building some kind of ways that how we can really collect this kind of data, and how we can have some data-driven policies. So I wanted your some opinion, or what is your say on data-driven policies for sustainable transportation? Because unless and until we do these data-driven policies, I don't think that it is going to, how to demonstrate. Shall we select that? Let us say that let us select 10 top sustainable cities, or the 10 top potential cities in India. Give them free hand, and then let us try to build policies out of that. Instead of just saying that, let it be a kind of policy on, or kind of white paper, let it be a kind of some demonstrative policies. And for that matter, definitely, I can assure you that Surat is one of the best city which we can look for. So, what is your piece of guidance to our ministry or authority, or the researchers, or the students, or even the job seekers, that how we should imbibe these data-driven policies in order to prove that sustainable transportation is the only way out to achieve and go ahead in the field of transportation? Your take, sir.
Yes. Well, I am a data geek like you. I love seeing statistics and graphs and spreadsheets and quantitative analysis. But the starting point is asking, what is it we're going to try and measure? So we need to make sure that our analysis really supports sustainable transportation planning. Let me give you an example. Most cities have data on the speed of cars. So you can calculate how fast traffic is moving. And especially now, there's some new technologies using mobile phone data, and you can buy it from your service providers. And so you can see how the cars are moving. But in most cases, we don't have good information on pedestrian travel or on bicycle travel. And so if you're trying to put together a business case for, let's say, building bike lanes, or for giving buses priority, or something like that, often you haven't collected the data needed. So the first thing I think we need to do is make sure that we have true, comprehensive, multimodal data, that we have information on walking and bicycling and scooters, and we have information, for example, on what are the travel patterns of poor people, what are the travel demands of vendors or of the people, the small scale freight, people that are using a pedal truck or something, or a very small truck. In most cases, in most cities, you don't have information on them. And so you can't, you don't know where you should put in special lanes or special parking or things like that. So part of the bias that we have in favor of automobile transportation is that we have better statistics on automobile transportation, and we don't usually have the data that we need to justify non-motorized transportation. So that's one area, is to develop real good, much better multimodal performance indicators, the data that we need. But really, the most important, the most difficult thing to change, it isn't the physical world, it's the way. So remember, I started off talking about the paradigm shift. The paradigm shift means we're changing the way we define problems and evaluate solutions. So the old paradigm, it assumed that faster is always better, that our transportation system should always be designed to favor the faster forms of transportation. And so we end up investing in automobile transportation and underinvesting in what you could call the affordable forms of transportation, or the healthy forms of transportation, or the resource efficient forms of transportation, and that's walking and bicycling and public transit. So the first change is really changing the way people think about the problem, and to say that allowing somebody to walk or bicycle is as important or even more important as allowing somebody to drive a car. We're not saying there should be no driving. We're not saying nobody should ever drive a car. But what we're saying is, when resources are limited, so there's only so much road space, your city only has so much space, that the priority should be for the affordable, resource efficient, safer, healthier modes, and that's walking and bicycling and public transit, over somebody driving and parking their car on that street. So I know it's, once we have that clearly in our minds, it's not just you, it's the mayor, it's the city councilor, it's the policymakers. Once they realize that everybody can be better off with bus lanes and bike lanes and complete streets and shifting our resources, once we agree, then it's up to you to figure out the details and how to do that. The good news is cities all around the world are doing this. You will find examples and case studies all over the world. And so one of the best things that you can do is become an expert. You can study how other cities are implementing their sustainable transportation, and then you can figure out how you can apply it in your city. So I can't do it. I'm way out here in Canada, and I have general ideas. My information is very general, but you have to take these ideas and apply them in your city. So that means you can become the expert. It's up to you to become the leading expert on sustainable urban transportation planning in your area. And the good news is, I know there are a lot of really smart people in India. And so, unfortunately, I don't have any pictures. I can't see all these smart young students that you've got, but I trust that there are a lot of enthusiastic young people who are ready to be leaders in sustainable transportation planning in India. And you will become rich and famous and be able to see your work. If you become an expert in sustainable transportation, you will help create better cities, and so you'll make people happier and healthier. What do you think? Is that are there a lot of young planners and engineers who are ready to be to work on sustainable transportation planning in your city?
Yeah, certainly. We have lot of institutes which are running the doctoral programs and the graduate programs, and
Yeah.
certainly there is a team spirit, and then we have very good collaborations also all over India, and through that we really hope that we will come out with some good demonstrative projects, and we will show that this is how the sustainability has changed over the year of a decade or so, and we can let's hope that we will be able to produce some good examples in sustainable transportation in India.
Absolutely.
Mr. Todd, it was really a very comprehensive discussion with you. Any event without any acknowledgement of the people involved will be incomplete. So let me express formally the vote of thanks for those who have really taken efforts, and of course our participants, including all. On behalf of organizers, the organizers are Atal Innovation Center of SURATi iLAB. It's a special purpose vehicle company which is owned by Surat Municipal Corporation, and they work with SURATi and IoT and all together. So all of us, we are involved in organizing this particular session and making a very good outreach activity that many people from all over world, they are attending this particular session. Let me tell you, I will be also giving you the composition of the participants who are attending by their profession, and then only by also maybe different parts of world. So let me propose formally, sir, we are very much thankful to you, Mr. Todd Litman, for your wonderful presentation, motivation, inspiration, that how we have to really strive for achieving this sustainable transportation. I can understand that definitely it's a time more than 8:30 p.m. for you in Canada, but you have really mesmerized most of the people all over world in this particular session, that we have forgotten all our usual business, routine business, and then we are almost into your session throughout. So we are very much thankful to you, sir, for your very comprehensive presentation, spending so much of time on making this presentation, and then showing us the path that how exactly we can do at least delta X to move ahead in this area and then achieve some sustainable transportation. So once again, thank you so much for spending your time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me go ahead to congratulate and also to acknowledge the efforts by our office bearers, Dr. G.J. Doshi and also Dr. Rajesh Pandya, who are the office bearers, respectively chairman and the secretary of the IoT Institute of Urban Transport. Those who have provided this particular opportunity to hear Mr. Todd Litman, and there was a very good interaction also from these two. Particularly, it was very nice to hear a opinion from academician and researcher. Although he is also involved in many of the practical projects with SMC, and of course we have also heard parallelly, concurrently to Dr. Rajesh Pandya, who has almost represented the side of the authority, how a local government thinks and what are the problems they may face and what is their say and how situation can improve from there. So it was really wonderful, wonderful to listen to them concurrently, and then although they are the main pillars of this particular chapter, certainly it has provided a good bend to this particular event. Apart from that, I am also very much thankful that this event is being hosted in the premises of our institute, that is Sardar Vallabhbhai National Institute of Technology, and we must acknowledge the support which is extended by our administration, director, and all the deans and all those involved in this particular making of this event. And of course, we also acknowledge the efforts in creating this platform link from this SURATi iLAB, their special purpose vehicle, because of which we are able to see each other and interact with each other. And I'm sure that this interaction is going to be even more intense, no doubt about it. I think, and the last but not least, I must acknowledge the efforts of our PhD student, Mr. Nandan Dauda, who is a very good friend of yours now. Yeah, I'm very happy, and I try to also acknowledge that moment when he met you on a very big platform of 99th Transportation Research Board annual meeting, and it was that particular interaction which has faced us this particular moment and the session, and due to which we are able to interact again. So I must acknowledge the efforts and the consistent interaction with you by Mr. Nandan Laura. So he is a highly motivated person right now, and I can say that he is almost like a representative of the researchers and the potential, maybe even practitioner, in order to improve the sustainable transportation in times to come. So with this, and then of course I should not miss the participants. Let me acknowledge the presence of participants from different parts. Of course, it may not be possible to take to different countries. Of course, there are more than 9 countries participants. They are attending this particular session, and they had a very nice time. I hope that. I would like to just tell you that there are 28% of academicians, there are 32% of PG students, and there are 88.5 or close to 9% doctoral students. And there are more than 15% professionals, those who are directly connected with industry, and they are trying to do something related to urban transportation or improve, in a way, sustainable transportation policies and their implementation in their parts. Apart from that, of course, government organizations are also there, close to 7%, and some private services, they are close to 28%. So you can see the composition. I think nothing can get better than this. So all in all, I definitely propose acknowledge your effort and your presence in this particular session. And it was really a very great interaction, and I think we will remember this interaction for times to come. And very soon, I think next month, we can also plan some more interactions. Thank you so much once again, Mr. Todd Litman. We say that you are synonym of sustainable transportation. Thank you.
Thank you all.
So thank you, Mr. Todd. It was wonderful to have you with us, and we are impressed by the comprehensiveness of your presentation, and we are also, recharged by the ideas. Otherwise, the kind of environment dwelling here, it's quite, frustrating for people like us who strive to achieve sustainability and particularly social equity. That is what the most affected aspect of transportation system in our cities. So we have really recharged us. We are highly motivated, and with the help of the local government and the officials at the Ministry of Housing and Development, we'll try to push the policies towards sustainability in transportation system by drawing some short-term, medium-term, and long-term plans to improve the scenario. And you rightly pointed out, it is the biggest challenge is not to create the physical infrastructure, but to change the mindset of the users. And I will try to share later on. We have worked on aspect of habit of using personal modes of travel in our cities, and it was a doctoral work. I will share abstract of the work with you, so we will be able to synthesize the work which we have carried out in travel demand, mode shift, sustainable transportation, etc. together, and help the national government and the local government to develop the short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies to improve the unworthy situations with reference to sustainability. So thank you so much again, and we'll be in constant touch with you, and we'll see that your expertise is well utilized by the policymakers and planners at different levels of decision making in India. Thank you so much, Todd. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
That's all for today. We'll be coming up with the next webinar series in next month or in nearby future. Thank you, everyone. And we are signing out now.